Hello everyone, today we come to the next 13 horror stories told in storms. Let's start. Story 1, The White Chicken. I used to know and went to school with some Hmong people in North Carolina who lived on a large piece of land and had a farm. They had 5 kids, 2 boys and 3 girls. Everyone was older than 10, and the oldest son went off to college. This story is based on the oldest son who came back from college during spring break, and a couple of my friends who were friends with him. While in college, he met a nice blonde girl who also liked him a lot. However, when they visited his parents did not approve of their relationship. They knew this already, but were hoping to change their minds. One day, the boy's dad told him to break up with her, because it would look bad in their family to marry someone else out of the race. The boy was very angry and sad. He called the girl and told her that he needed some space and time apart. She knew he was lying, and asked if it was his dad who told him to say that. He didn't reply, and a week later, he broke it off. The school year was almost over with, and everyone was moving out of their dorms. The girl kept calling and bothering him about taking her back, and eloping. He didn't return any of her calls or messages. During the summer they both were at a party. She wanted to talk about their situation, but he said he had moved on and has a new girlfriend. She was so heartbroken and left the party in anger. In the beginning of August, the boy was outside at home feeding the chickens when he noticed what appeared to be a white chicken perched on top of the chicken coop. The chicken was very different from all the other chickens. It had very long white feathers and it was smaller than the rest. He went inside to ask his dad whose chicken it was. His dad didn't know either, so they both went outside to look at it, but it was gone. Later that night when everyone was asleep, the chicken had came to sit by the boy's window. The boy had woken up from a dream and looked down on the floor. He noticed a shadow that looked like a woman's figure, but when he looked out to his windows, he saw the chicken. It frightened him and he went to tell his parents. They came into his room to look, but nothing was there. The next day, the dad went out to feed the chickens. When the dad was feeding the chickens, he spotted the white chicken on top of the coop. He picked it up, but all of a sudden he became weak and fell to the floor. No one knew about it. Finally, the boy's mom realized that the dad had been gone for a while, so she went to check on him. She found him on the floor, paralyzed and pale. She screamed for the family to call 911 and took their dad inside. The boy saw the chicken walking back behind the chicken coop, and he followed it. Suddenly, it disappeared. He looked out into the distance, and saw a white girl with blonde hair. He yelled to her, but nothing. A few days later his friends came over and told him about his ex-girlfriend. She had committed suicide. He didn't know anything about it, but his friends said she killed herself behind their house by the pond. It is said that her spirit managed to find its way to their chicken coop, and turned herself into a chicken to be closer to him. It was also said when the dad picked up the chicken he went paralyzed, because the girl paralyzed him due to the fact that he did not like her, and wanted his son to break up with her. Story 2. My mom told me this story. I'm not sure if she was faking the story or not, but this happened to a girl in her village back in Thailand. I'm telling it from my mom's point of view. This happened back in Thailand when your father and I were dating. A girl was dating this one guy. She didn't know much about him. One night he came over to visit her. She told him that her friend invited her to go watch a movie, but she didn't have any money. He replied, "Don't worry. Take my money of 100 baht." After their chat he left. She put the money under her pillow and slept. In the morning her friend came over to take her to the movies. She told her friend to wait for a bit while she goes get the money. She reached under her pillow pulling out a leaf. She thought to herself who would do this. She went around the house asking her family members if they have taken her money and replaced it with a leaf. Everyone replied, no. Her friend said since she can't find the money, they'll go tomorrow if she ever finds it. So because of what happened, she decided to stay home. At night her boyfriend came to visit again. She told him that someone took her money and replaced it with a leaf. She also told him that no one in her house took it. He replied, maybe they did take it and just won't confess. She replied, yeah, maybe. He gave her 500 baht this time. After that he left. This time she placed the money in her bra because she knew no one would look for money there. In the morning her friend came back to take her to the movies. Her friend said, "Are you ready?" She replied, "Yup." Pulling out money from her bra, she realized it was another leaf. This time she was scared. She talked to her friend about it. She also explained to her friend that her boyfriend never brings a flashlight when he comes visit her. Back in Thailand, boys would bring flashlight when they go visit a girl at her house. After their discussion her friend left. At night her boyfriend came back to visit her. When he got to her house, he called out her name. She did not reply for a bit. Instead, she decided to look through the cracks of the house. It was too dark for her to see him. She then later replied, "Hey, I don't really know you. Where are you from?" He replied, "I live in a village across pond next to the soccer field." They continued talking. Now he talked about how he was going to marry her, and tomorrow he was going to come take her with him. After that conversation he left. This time she was really scared. She didn't want to tell her parents. In the morning she went to ask her friend if she wanted to go with her to find her boyfriend's village. Her friend decided to go. They went to the soccer field and went to the pond. They looked across the pond only seeing shrubs and trees. She told her friend maybe the village is a bit farther away from the pond, so they went around the pond. They searched and searched. No sign of a village. They went home. She was really scared. After that she got really sick and was going to die. She also explained everything about her boyfriend to her parents and how he was going to marry her. Her parents went to go tell a shaman to check up on her. Later the shaman told them that there was a spirit that took their daughter's spirit away. They knew what was going on, so they were wondering if there was actually a village. They went to check again just in case if she missed it by chance. No sign of a village. Later the shaman told her parents that there was no village but an old grave there. The shaman had to sacrifice a few animals for the spirit. He also made a barrier to block him from coming back for her spirit. After that she got better. Story 3. This happened to me when I gave birth to my second daughter. The day I had her, she came out wonderful and everything, but that night she kept on crying. I couldn't take care of her yet, because I had her through C-section. My legs were still numbed from the anesthesia. The doctor suggested my husband help take care of our baby. We weren't able to sleep due to her crying. I decided to work hard on my walking that night/morning, so my legs would start to work normal again, and I would be able to take care of baby myself. I decided to work hard on my walking that night/morning so that my legs would start to function normally again, and I would be able to take care of the baby myself. The next day came and my husband told me he was going home to try to get some sleep. I said okay since my legs were working fine now, and they allowed me to take care of the baby. Night time came, and my baby was crying so much. I didn't know what to do, because my first baby had never cried like that. I was having a suspicious feeling about something, but just didn't want to think about it, since I was alone with my baby. My husband wasn't with us that night, so I tried to stay strong for my baby and myself, as I had been seeing shadows on the other side of the room where the nurse's workstation is. It's always on, so there's a small light on the other side of the room near the door you use to go in and out. I brushed it off, because I thought I was just seeing stuff. It was about 1:30 a.m., and my baby was still crying. I decided to have her sleep in the bed with me. I wanted to protect her from whatever it was that was bothering her. For about 10 minutes she finally fell asleep, and so did I. While we were sleeping, I had a dream here where these little kids/people that were dressed in white, and had very long hairs, just jumping around and playing. I told them to be careful because my baby was sleeping, and they might step on her. All of a sudden, they ran over to where my baby and I was, and started jumping on my baby. I was hitting them with one of my arms, while the other arm was holding my girl. My baby started crying and I woke up still swinging my arms around on top of my baby. My baby started crying, and I woke up, still swinging my arms above her. I got freaked out and started to cuddle my baby. I then fed her, and changed her diaper. At that time I was so tired I had to call the nurse. I told the nurse to please take my baby to the nursery for a couple of hours, so I can sleep for a bit. She smiled and said okay, and to let them know when I want her back. I replied to her that I'll put my call light on when I want her back. She took my baby and left the room. For about 15 minutes later I started to get tired again. I turned and laid on my right side facing the door that goes out to the hallway. When I was about to close my eyes, all of a sudden I saw someone, a dark figure, run up to my bed, jump, and sat at the foot of my bed. Then it jumped off and ran to the door that went out to the hallway. It was hiding behind the curtain the nurse usually uses to cover the room for patient privacy when the door is open, and it kept sticking its head in and out to look at me. The only light that was on was the bathroom lights. I tried to get up and move, but I didn't have the guts to because I was so scared. Then it disappeared. I was so scared that I was about to cry and scream, but didn't want the nurses to think I was crazy. I woke up and didn't have the feeling to go to sleep again. I turned on all of the lights in the room, turned the TV on, and called my husband. It was now 5 in the morning. He answered the phone. I told him to come over now, because something was not right. He asked what I meant by something is not right. I told him, you know what I mean. Husband, are you sure you're not dreaming? Me, I'm sure I'm not dreaming, so come now. Husband, can you try to explain to the nurse to see if they would let you switch rooms? Me, are you nuts? They're gonna think I'm crazy from the medicine that I've been taking. Husband, okay. I'll be over, but I have to cook something for you first, so it's going to take a while. I didn't get any sleep anyways because big girl, 1st kid, was up all night. Me, okay, hurry anyways. An hour had passed, and he finally got to the hospital. I was trying to tell him what happened, and he kept asking me, are you sure you're not dreaming? I replied to him that I was not dreaming. I pressed on the cow light for the nurses to bring my baby back. Before the nurse left the room, I asked her if my baby was good or if she was crying. The nurse responded that she slept pretty well and didn't cry at all. I thanked her, and she left the room. I decided to head home that day even though they offered for me to stay one more night. Story 4. Just like everyone else, my cousin Sua had a normal childhood. She was a happy, caring, and a very loving girl. Always very curious, so she asked a lot of questions. In the middle of her 7th grade she began changing. She became really skinny and always talked to herself. Or so we thought. Sua began to isolate herself from everybody and everything. Even the world. She would go to school and come straight home to her room. Her parents and siblings tried talking to her, but she wouldn't say much. Sua would tell them she's fine, and that she just likes being alone. They didn't think much of it, but little did they know she was slipping away and needed help. One day while Sua was at school, her brother Vang decided to set up a small tape player in her room under the bed. The next day when Sua left to school, Vang went into her room to get the tape player. Something suddenly slammed the door shut. Vang couldn't get it to open and started panicking. He pounded on the door so hard that he punched a hole in the door, and finally the door opened up. He didn't tell his parents about it. He went straight to his room to listen to the tape. He rewound it all the way to the beginning and listened. The first minute was quiet. Vang was about to turn it off when he heard a faint demonic voice said, "Your brother put it under your bed." Vang was scared, but he kept listening. Then there was a loud scary scream. It was Sua's voice. All these voices started talking and laughing. They were telling Sua it's her time, but she said she couldn't go yet. Then the tape ended. Vang looked up and bam, Sua was there in front of him. Vang got so scared he pushed her and ran out to the living room. He then told his family all about it, but they didn't believe him. He then gave them the tape, but when they listened to it, there was nothing. So they said he was just lying, trying to make them think Sua is crazy because she has been acting strange. They left it at that. One day, about 2 weeks later, their mom was home alone and had a feeling she wasn't alone in the house. Maybe what Vang said was true. So she slowly crept up to Sua's room and swung her door open. There was nothing, but she felt the presence of evil. She quickly went to the kitchen to grab peppers to burn around the house and said, "Nyag poj dab yog koj nyab hom kuv lub tsev cia li tom mu zuzu. Uain tej kuv ua fem, koj tzab tu siab, you monster. If you're in my house, get out nicely before I do bad, so don't be sad." After that, she felt the evil presence had left. When everyone came home, they coughed and sneezed because of the pepper. The kids and the father said jokingly, "Are you trying to kill us? What happened?" The mom then explained to them, and Sua seemed to be okay after that day. She started talking more and began eating more again, so they thought it was over. A month later, Sua began to feel really weak and her nose would bleed out or nowhere. She had fainted one morning before school. She was then rushed to the hospital and was diagnosed with cancer. Sua stayed at the hospital battling cancer for 2 months before she had died. Nothing happened at the house anymore, but things started happening at the hospital when only one person stays with Sua. Voices were heard if any of the family was alone with her. Sua would open her eyes, roll them back, and sometimes giggle. It never happened and the nurses or doctors were in the room. During her stay there, the family did Ua Neeb for her and the shaman said it was too late to fetch her spirit back. She has gone too far. The ghosts/demons took her because they wanted to come into the world and needed her body. So, because the mom burned pepper and they got scared, they left and gave her cancer so they could come back to her at the hospital. R.I.P. Sua. I miss you. Story 5. A Fisherman's Tale. San Luis Reservoir, 152. Los Baños, California. Submitted by Anonymous. We often hear these stories, the fishermen and their so make-believe catches and their stories of big fish. Then, we hear the other ones, the dark ones, the ones that happen, and as much as the fisherman talks, they don't ever speak about it. Why? Because it scares them. It takes them back to a place they don't ever want to remember. There are things that go bump in the night. There are things that come in with the fog. And so as long as the blood in me is those of the Hmong, there are things that I will always be afraid of. Men or woman, you'll be a fool to not believe in these things, for we are born Hmong, and these things, we can't escape. Every time someone asks me for a scary story, this is the only one that comes to my mind. It happened to my 2 friends and me, and like all stories, it would be hard to believe it myself if I wasn't there. The bite at the lake had been incredible that year. So good, in fact, that my friend decided to get a boat. He and I had went out the weekend before and there were no problems or issues, just easy limits of fish. When his friend had heard, he insisted that we take him. It was set. The day came. We met up in the morning and drove out to the lake. We got there early like we always do, so early the gates weren't even open yet. We waited, the workers came, paid, launched, and got out on the water. The fog was sitting thick that morning. It was expected to burn off or lift as the day got hotter, and there was no warning in place, so we thought nothing of it. Not only that, our first spot was a main lake point just across the channel from the launch, an easy run. We fished the first area, Dinosaur Point, a good spot, but the striper would always run so fast through there, so when the bite stopped, we decided to run. The sun was up by now, but the fog had not lifted much. All three of us are familiar with the lake, so with the knowledge, we decided to make the run across the lake to the dam. It was an easy process, or so we thought. We were right across from the dam. It was easy, point the boat in that direction and go until we reached the dam. We were driving blind. Soon enough we saw the shoreline, starboard, right hand. We knew we could follow it to the dam, so we did, and we made it. The fishing was incredible that day, fish after fish, and we ran into other boaters as well, so we knew we weren't alone out there. We had fished the dam, all of it. We eventually made our way to the end of the dam, Romero, and decided to run back west towards the launch. Our plan was to fish the backwaters for some largemouth before calling it quits and going home. So, with the same idea, we pointed the boat west towards the launch, and we ran. This is the scary part. This is the part where one must be brave. For if that one person gets scared, then all is lost. As frightened as you are, you must keep it all inside, show no signs of it. We had been running now for about 15 minutes. Any other day, we would have already been across the lake, but with the fog, we took it slow and cruised. Soon enough we found shore, and we thought that we had made it. As we approached, I saw it. We all saw it. It was a building, the building on the cliff. The visitor center at Romero. How could it be? We have been running for some time now. Going away from this place. When we had left, this place was to our backs. How did we end up going in circles if the boat was pointed straight? I was at the wheel. I swore I didn't make any turns. We thought nothing of it. We had to show no fear. So, we made the second run. This time we made it. We found our way back Dinosaur Point. We should have just left right then and there, but we didn't. The upper creek wasn't that big, and we knew we would be safe now since we were already there, and the launch was close by. We fished it, and again caught fish. This time a big girl, a 30 along with a lot of largemouth. Soon enough, we decided to call it quits and called it a day. It was getting late in the afternoon, and with all the action, we had already soon forgot about what happened earlier that day. We began making the run out of the creek, and over to the launch. We never made it. The boat had ran out of gas. And like that, all the excitement was gone, the fear had crept back. We again had to be brave and had to think nothing of it. We had paddles on board and the batteries were still working, so we jumped on over to the trolling motor and got as far as we could. Soon enough the batteries ran out. Right in that moment with my quick thinking, I looked over to my friend. He had some battery left on his phone, and luckily, he had service. I told him to call the main office, and so we called in the emergency. We gave them our location and told them exactly how to find us. We were now shored, across the channel from the launch with darkness quickly approaching. We had to think quick. We had rope on the boat, so we tied up the boat and began dragging it. We all took turns. It was a heavy thing. I knew if we stayed where we were at then, they wouldn't have found us. It would have took them all night, and most likely they would have called off the search since the fog was still there. We kept hiking and dragging that boat. Eventually before night fell, we made it a point. It wasn't a far point, but with the little bit of light left, we were able to see the other side. It wasn't far. We could see it, and this was probably the best area to cross. We needed to cross. It was the only way we would be on the right side, the side that they would begin their search. We all jumped in the boat and pushed off. Again, we took turns paddling just like how we dragged it. It was already dark by now, but we knew and had hoped that we would be okay. Soon, after one got tired, another would paddle. That channel wasn't that far. We should have made it in no time, but we didn't. As much as we paddled, we weren't going anywhere. They weren't going to let us go home. The boat had stopped, like if someone or something was holding on to it. We paddled and, still, we sat there in the middle of the channel and didn't move. Parents and elders always speak of things like this. When you're the most frightened or scared, you either pray or you yell. Whether in your heart or out loud. You said what you needed to. It was my turn to paddle again. Both of my friends now tired and given up. With the paddle in my hands, I began paddling. As I paddled, I yelled out in my heart. I'm not going to stay here. I'm not here for you. I did not come here for this. I want to go home. As soon as I finished, the boat moved, like some weight had been lifted or a knot untied. We made it to shore that night. Soon enough, we saw the lights from the rescue boat, and we were pulled back to the launch. The rescue workers told us how lucky we are, and that it was a long night for them, for others are still on the lake as well. We packed up and left. No one said a word. We didn't speak until we made it back to town. We all felt it. Something wasn't right that day. A few days after, we met up again. We decided to talk and tried to laugh off what had happened the days before. The friend of ours had brought his wife over, and she joked about it as well. Then we found out what had happened. The day before we went out, a bird had came to visit him, bad omen. It flew in his house. Him, knowing nothing and not thinking anything of it, released it. She had yelled at him about it and called her father, whom came over to make sure it wasn't anything bad. He didn't tell us about it. As Hmong, we were always told to go out in pairs. Never go odd in a group. After the incident, my grandma, a shaman, then told me to carry a certain type of knife with me in my car. She said the knife will help you fight off the dragons. Maybe she had known. My mother is a shaman as well. Maybe she knows what happened that night, but I never brought it up. I didn't want to know. Till this day, I still haven't asked her what it was. Nowadays when I see them, they would always ask, "Did you ever ask your mother?" I just say no. Story 6, The Ninth Person. This is sort of a long story, so please bear with me. This story might not be as scary as other stories posted on here, but this experience is 100% real. I'm assuming that mostly everyone here knows the tale of Nsawag, orphan, and his Nyam Kaj Swag Pai, dragon girl. If you do, you can skip this paragraph and head on to the next paragraph. If some of you guys don't, a quick synopsis of it all: an orphan falls in love with a dragon girl, and over the course of having to fight for their love, he wins her hand in marriage. Their marriage ends soon, due to the jealous suitor of dragon girl. He sends out a toad demoness to seduce orphan. Orphan then forces dragon girl to go back home. He suddenly realizes that he was under a spell, and was tricked. He then yearns for dragon girl back. But getting her back was not easy. Over the course of time, they were finally reunited through their firstborn son. There was a specific scene in this tale that I wanted to go into detail before telling you all of our experience. Orphan was told to fill up barrels of water and line them up in the path that dragon girl and her new husband were to fly through. When he sees the reflection of his beloved, he must try to snatch the reflection away. So when he saw dragon girl, he tried to snatch her reflection. He was too slow, water was splashing all over the place, and he eventually failed. With the background information, we can now move on to the story. Please enjoy. It was June of this year. My friends and I were planning a trip at this beautiful resort surrounded by many beaches. There was a total of 8 people that went on this trip. To get to our destination, it was an hour-and-a-half drive from our friends, Evan and Vince's apartment. The destination was 4 hours away from my home. Once we got to this resort, we were in awe with everything. When we settled into our room, we quickly went out to the beach. We tested out the waters and it was super cold. One of my friends, Ken, decided it would be hilarious to act out the barrels scene. Splashing the water aggressively, Ken calls out, "Nyam Koj Swag Pie. Kuv Tus Nyam Koj Swag Pie. Rav Kab Los. Dragon Girl. My Dragon Girl. Come back." In this moment, we were laughing hysterically at him. The next day, we checked out of our room and went to explore another beach. Ken then acted out the scene again. But this time, he was further away. The water was at the level of his waist. He quickly came back, and he hurriedly decided it was time we head back to our friend's apartment. We got back to the apartment in the afternoon. That night, Ken's girlfriend, Barbie, and I were asleep in one room. Barbie and I were almost like one person. We were best friends who had the same interests, same mentality, and hated and liked the same things. So this was where it gets strange. I had a short dream that night, but it was the most vivid dream that I could remember. We were all at the same last beach again. From the perspective that I was seeing this dream, I saw one by one, each 8 individual that went to the trip, running diagonally away from the beach. However, there was a 9th person running with us, following us. This 9th person, I could only make out the body. I could tell that it was a female. She was dressed like a normal person, but when I would try to look at her face, it was impossible to get a clear and full glimpse. It was almost like her deep, midnight hair blew with the wind to always cover her face. It also felt as though she didn't want me to see her face. I quickly woke up and found that our other friends were still up. I didn't think much about the dream, so I slowly made my way back to a deep slumber. The next day, I told Barbie about my dream. As I was telling her and describing to her the 9th person, her eyes widened and her visage on her face changed. It turned from curiosity, quickly into fear. Shakingly, she told me, "You dreamt about her too." Barbie started telling me about her dream. She told me that she was looking out into the balcony of Evan and Vince's apartment and saw Ken with the girl who was giving oral love to him. Barbie runs towards them and yells out, "Ken, what are you doing? Why would you do this to me?" Ken says, "We're just friends and we are helping each other out." Barbie also said that the girl looked like a normal person. You could make out the body, but you could never catch a glimpse of her face. It always seemed like the girl's back was always facing Barbie. One thing was for sure, we dreamt about the same girl. I quickly felt a powerful bolt of fear taking over every fiber and cell of my body. Was this a coincidence? Wait, this cannot be a coincidence. We then decided to tell our friends about both of our dreams. Ken finally told us that at the very last beach that we were at, while he was far into the water, screaming out "Nyam Koj Swag Pie," he had a gut feeling that if he went any further, something terrible was going to happen. That was why he quickly came back and decided for us to leave. When we finally left Evan and Vince's apartment to go back home, Ken remembered that his sister told him to always stop at a gas station because if anything were to follow you back, it'd be like tricking them to think you live at the gas station. We took precautions and stopped at a gas station while heading home. After that, we never dreamt of the girl again. Looking back, Barbie and I concluded our dreams. My dream was the first dream because I dreamt about it when our friends were still up. Whereas Barbie dreamt her dream when everyone was fast asleep. So we interpreted my dream as it was telling us that someone/something followed us back to Vince and Evan's apartment. That's why Barbie even dreamt about the girl. We also came to the conclusion that since Ken only went to waist level, that might have been why the girl was at Ken's waist in Barbie's dream. So that was why Ken had that gut feeling of not going any further. When you get that gut feeling, you feel it almost within your waist. After this happened, Ken said that he would never do this again, for something might follow him. I'm glad that we didn't experience anything beyond our dreams. Sometimes, maybe dreams are warnings that are trying to help us from the things that we can't always see. Story 7, Camping Trip Gone Wrong. I was 8 years old. Every year, my church went on a camping trip. I always looked forward to this event. It was that time again and we were finally on our way to the campground. We have never been to this campground before, but we were eager to explore something new. More than 50 congregation members were present. All of us set up our tents and built a fire. Everything was fine. Our first night was normal. At night, the adults would sit around their fire pit and tell ghost stories. The youth and kids would sit around in another pit and tell stories as well. Eventually, everyone would migrate and sit with the adults. The adults had the best ghost stories. They would go on about their experiences back in Laos. One of the elders said that if you're a Christian, you know when a ghost comes because the wind will blow and it will rain. If you're a shaman, the area will get cold. After the ghost stories, everyone would go back to their tents and sleep. This night was peaceful. The following day was beautiful. It was a nice sunny day with no clouds in the sky. While the adults were making lunch, all of the kids were playing in the open field. All of the kids went running to the middle of the field and all of a sudden it started to get windy. Thinking back to what the elder said, I thought, is something coming? The wind came and then out of nowhere it started raining. The wind and the rain literally started chasing the kids. We all panicked because we were getting wet and so we ran back to the campsite. When we finally got back, the wind and the rain had stopped. I remember thinking how weird it was that it just rained out of nowhere. I didn't think much of it. Even the other congregation members just brushed it off. We all went about our business. That night, all of us did the same thing. Sat around the bonfire and told stories. This night, I was spooked. For some reason, I couldn't sleep at all. I tossed and turned and finally drifted off to bed. All of a sudden I heard this loud cry. It sounded like a donkey was crying, but it wasn't a donkey. No donkey could make a noise this loud. Plus, it was in the middle of the woods. It could not be a donkey. The noise was sporadic, it'd go on and all of a sudden it would be dead silent. There was no explanation to this noise. I've never heard of anything like this at the other campsites we visited. Being a light sleeper, I was the first to wake in my tent. My dog, who usually slept by my feet, was now curled up in between my sleeping bag. At this point, I was really scared. My dog is quite vicious and for him to just curl up not make a sound was very out of the norm for him. I called his name and he would just look at me, but still curled up. The noise eventually woke up the other congregation members. I woke up my dad and told him something was going on out there. My dad woke up and told me to stay in the tent. I was the only one in the tent awake at this point and I couldn't shake my feeling of fear. Whatever was making the noise was still at it. Around me, I heard the adult men waking up one another. All of them hopped into their cars and started driving around and honking the horns. As they moved further away from the campsite, the noise seemed to travel from tree to tree. With all of the commotion from the car horns and the unexplainable donkey noise, everyone was awake. We gathered together to pray and retreated to our tents to sleep through the rest of the night. We were never able to find the creature that made that noise, but when morning came around, we were packed up and ready to leave. Our church never went back. I'm 23 now and I still remember the events clearly. A few months ago, I was watching a documentary about Forest Demon. I asked my dad if we had a similar belief. He said, "It's the Phim Nuaj Vame." He then went on and said, "Don't you remember it came to us when we went camping?" I was shocked that my dad had waited so long to tell me what that thing was. My dad finally told me what he did that night. He and a few other guys brought guns. They hopped into the car to chase the thing away. They said it hopped from one tree to another. The trees would shake like something big had jumped on it, but they couldn't see anything. They could only hear it. On that camping trip, my dad was in charge to choose the camping ground. He said, "We almost didn't go there, because the place had been banned from camping for unexplained reasons." At the last minute, my dad received the call that we could go camp at the campsite. We went, but the rangers told us to be cautious of our surroundings, because they've been getting a lot of complaints about the campsite. This has been my only paranormal experience. I didn't believe in the Phim Nuaj Vame, but you had to be there to feel how the environment changed when the thing came. Also, it wasn't just one person who experienced the thing. Everyone that was there felt its presence. Story 8, The Rising. Growing up in the U.S., my best friends were all animists and believed in the power of the shaman. I was a Christian and had grown up believing in God only, but it seemed like I never really had any Christian friends. For every type of issue, their family would consult a shaman. It helped that the Central Valley of California had a high population of refugee Hmongs, and so they had quite a few resources. During New Year, if you needed a shaman for the new year, they'd have one. For sickness, they'd have one, and for newborns, you guessed it, they'd also have one. One time during the new year, my friend and I came home from school and without knowing, told me to come inside his house. I noticed some intricate paperwork and branches above the door, but did not pay attention as we stepped into his house. We BS'd, talked about the chicks at school, decided when we'd ditch some hotties from another high school, talked about fishing, etc., and all of a sudden his dad came into the room. He says to my friend Ensej Mwag x UAB. Ua li kas coached sis pab li. Peb tsav nub no lom nas. Face evil, how come you don't know? We are fasting for New Year. For those who don't know what TSAIV means, it's traditionally a couple of days of not spending money, welcoming the new year, and something to do with inviting spirits of the ancestors to bless the family for the new year. My friend said to me, "Oh shoot," but with an I instead, and he said, "Let's get out of here right now." I was deeply confused and did not know what I did wrong, nor did I bother. After that we went to the local arcade to play some old school Super Street Fighter for Tournament Edition. We stayed for a few hours, and I got a ride from my friend's home. That was when the fun started. As I was lying down in my bed and dozed off, exactly 3:00 a.m., I woke up in a cold sweat. Somehow I knew I wasn't dreaming, because I noticed that there was a white horse in my room. It had a brown saddle on, along with a whip on its side and a huge Shaolin-style sword in a sheath holding it. It made a motion for me to ride on it and take me on an adventure. I was pretty tired from all of the day's activities and had school in a few hours, but I wasn't going to refuse an opportunity to go on a horseback ride, and off I went. From what I can remember, I rode Pegasus to my friend's house, and what I saw scared the crap out of me. Sitting in his living room were about 6 people who I didn't recognize. They were dressed in some weird-looking Hmong clothes with shoes that looked like elves. They were eating some old fruits, rice, meat, and drinking what looked like some old cans of beer. Tearing it up and making a huge mess. I got off Pegasus, unsheathed the sword, and chopped off 3 off their heads. The other 3 ran towards me, but I did a spinning hurricane blade chop, and sliced them in half cleanly. Then all of a sudden I heard a loud thunderous voice say to me, "Koj yog leechtwug. Ua li kas koj tuaj tuas kuv cov kuvtigenov. Who are you? Why'd you kill my relatives?" I got scared, saddled up, and rode away as fast as I could back to my house. I then got off of Pegasus and jumped back into bed. The next day when I woke up, my cell phone blew up. I had over 250 text messages saying to check YouTube. I was shocked because I didn't know what they meant. Apparently, I had left my webcam on that night, and it was set to auto-upload to my YouTube account. As I watched what was uploaded into my account, I gasped in horror as I saw myself riding an invisible horse, slashing with an invisible sword and kicking something in the air. I couldn't believe that I had over 1 million views already either. I looked at my hair and I had a white streak right in the middle of my hair. I also had what looked like green slime all over my shorts. When I got to school, my friend wasn't there. After school, I went over to his house and his family had moved. I asked the neighbors where they had gone to, and they said no one has lived here for over 2 years. I couldn't believe it and went inside the house. The first thing I noticed was that there was green slime everywhere in the house, along with horse hairs scattered all over the living room. I then went to my friend's room and inside was a picture of me and him together with a white horse in the middle. From that day on, I knew I was going to become a shaman. Story 9. My grandpa passed away 2 weeks ago on August 31. We had just finished with his funeral a week ago. This is a story about what my family and I experienced. Since the beginning of July, my grandpa was in the hospital at Portland Community Hospital on life support. He was in the hospital due to having a stomach ulcer. The first week he was there, he looked normal. He was happy, laughing, and being funny, but he was getting worse and worse. They took him in to get surgery on his stomach. A week after the surgery, my grandpa's stomach wasn't healing. It was rotting. We didn't know why, because the doctors and nurses has always been taking good care of him. My grandpa been in the hospital more than 5 times. My grandpa got on life support because he was having a very hard time breathing. My grandpa wasn't waking up no matter how much we called him. The doctors pronounced him dead, but we still believed that he was going to wake up if we kept the life support on. On the last week of July, I started having dreams of my grandpa. He came to me and told me how there is no heaven. There is no heaven for us people. He told me that he's living in a place that looked like a place where immigrants come and stay temporarily. Except there is no day, no night, and no light. The sky is always gray. The place where he lived in was crowded with all kinds of race. More and more people kept on coming. He said he was sick of that place. He told my dad and I to burn him a lot of money, so he can give it to the workers to get his land. I woke up not remembering it, but later remembered. I told my dad, and my dad was confused because my grandpa was still at the hospital on life support. Then I told my dad, his spirit had already left his body. We should go to the hospital now and take off the plug. My dad was furious at me for saying such things like that. I told my mom, and she understood. We burned paper money for him. A couple of days later, I had Anathet dream about him. He came and told me to live my life while I still can, and do not believe in any religion. Some people who were shamans that did a lot of jingle bells for people, they only do the things they do, and want people to believe because they only want money. He also said he met a lot of people with different religions, and they said it wasn't real. They just needed something to believe in. My grandpa told us to not unplug the plug, because if we do, my grandpa would really disappear from our world and into the world that he is now living in, wouldn't be able to contact us. I told my dreams to my parents. As usual, my dad wouldn't believe me, but my mom believed and understand. I didn't have any dreams about him for almost a month. The last dream I had about him was really scary. I was walking on a deserted land and came upon a Hmong bamboo house. I threw a stick inside the open door to see if there was any movement. Then I felt someone behind me, and right when I turned around to look, my grandpa put his hand on my back and said, "Come on in. Come on in, son." I got spooked because he had a creepy smile on while he said that. When we got inside the house, everything around me started getting so bright, even the bottom of the ground and above me, you know when you look at a car's headlight and it's bright white and yellow? He told me, "Son, I want you to live your life the right way, and be good because there is no heaven. I've learned that earth is not big enough for a heaven and a hell. We died to only come back and live in a land like yours, but with no night, no day, and no light. Only a gray sky. Live your life here while you're still alive. Believe me, because all the people here in my land are just waiting to get back in your land. Some have been waiting for more than thousands of years." I then said okay. All of a sudden, I was walking in a forest dressed in a ranger's clothing. Then I heard a lot of laughing that sounded like my grandpa, and it was coming from everywhere around me. I was really scared. I was like, man, F this. Why should I be scared? It's just my grandpa. Then all of a sudden, my grandpa was right in front of me naked. Floating in the air with his mouth open. I saw his surgery cut and black stuff was coming out of it. I was so horrified I woke up right away and called my girlfriend. I was able to sleep again. The next day we took off the plug, and my grandpa was already dead. My dad was in tears, and so was I. We did his funeral a week ago. Nothing happened luckily. Story 10. This happened a while back. After me and some friends were out of school, we decided to go to California for a summer trip. One of my older friend and her husband were expecting a baby. During the trip, she was very limited to the activities we did because she was pregnant. Like how some Hmong people say, if you're pregnant you are not allowed to go in an open water because your baby will be taken away. We went to the beach, and she got into the water. I guessed we should have told her not to, but we all didn't really care about the superstitions Hmong people had. A couple of weeks after the trip, I had a lot of nightmares. It was always a lady who was drenched in water. She had a bloody face, thick dark hair, pale skin, and was skinny. She would always chase me around my neighborhood in the middle of the night, or choke me in my living room and bedroom. She would laugh the whole time while she was trying to kill me. Every time I tried to ask her who she was, her eyes would just get bigger, and she would laugh even more. It got to the point where I woke up from the nightmares, and not even want to fall asleep. The last nightmare I had of her, she had stabbed me in my stomach. As I was laying there trying to see if any blood was coming out of my stab wound, she laughed. I then finally asked her who she was and why does she keep coming into my dreams. She told me she had come for revenge. She said we had took her life away and now she had come torture us. I asked her again who she was because I still didn't know who is she. She shouted at me in Hmong, "I am Bao's, let's call her that, daughter. The one you guys killed." After she said that, I woke up and was so confused, and at this point, I was scared because it was dark, and I couldn't tell what was real and what was a dream at that point anymore. The next day I found out that Bao had lost her baby. When I heard this, I got pretty freaked out. A couple of days later I got sick, and called my parents and told them. They did a hooplig for me, and also, one of the grandma did a small Ua Neeg ritual for me. Even till this day, I had never told Bao about my dreams. It could have just been a coincidence, but I haven't had any nightmares since. Story 11, College Days. I never believed in the paranormal until I went away for college. When I was 17, I moved out of my parents' house and got an apartment with some college friends. It was the usual college apartment with parties and people going in and out at all hours of the day. It wasn't abnormal to come home to find complete strangers passed out on the couch, or waking up in the early mornings to people still partying in the living room. Those were the days of true freedom. We lived on the third floor of a 4-story complex, and the building was built in the late 1800s. So there was a lot of history, as I came to find out. Throughout its life, The building was a brothel, rest home, bar, hotel, and in the 1950s. It was also a tuberculosis hospital for children. All the apartments were either hospital rooms or doctors' offices during that time, and there were still walls that looked like it was a hospital. It had one small elevator that went from the basement to the 4th floor. The elevator had one of those manual doors where you had to shut, and it was extremely slow. Sometimes it wouldn't work, so you'd get stuck and have to call the maintenance guy to come and get you out. There was also a basement where the washer and dryer for the building was located, and it had a door to the parking garage also located in the basement. Later I find out that the basement was a morgue for the many children who passed away from tuberculosis. After living at this place for 4 months, we started to get acquainted with the neighbors. Most were college students or young professionals that were hardly home same as us. There were some older people that had bought some of the apartments. Because older folks hated the loud noise of the wooden floors, they opted to live or buy apartments up on the 4th floor. One of many incidents that scared me was the following. One night after studying late, I realized that I had to do laundry. It was already past 2 a.m., and being a poor college student, I didn't have much clothing. Which meant that I had to do at least one load of laundry a week, and the stupid washer and dryer in the basement was always being used, so I had to bring my basket of clothes downstairs and put it in a queue for the wash. Sometimes the line was long and other times it was short. If it was long, I'd just leave it in the basement and check on it in an hour or so. This particular time, there was another basket ahead of mine, so I left it in the basement and went back to my apartment to watch some TV while I waited. Mind you, it was already around past 2 a.m. I was tired, so I fell asleep while waiting, and woke up about 45 minutes later. So around 3 a.m., I went to the basement to put my clothes in. When I got to the basement, someone had went through my clothes and took out my jeans and t-shirts and put it out on the sorting table. It was laid out like someone was trying to see what pants went with what shirts dress style. I checked and they were dried and not washed, so I found it strange that someone would mess with my clothes. Although somewhat anxious, I decided to do my laundry and put that clothes in the washer, then eventually the dryer. I left a note down there asking people not to go into my laundry. The next morning I told my friends and they just kind of brushed it off, and poked fun at the situation. About a week later, I ran into one of my neighbors and she told me that it had happened to her before too late at night just like me. Additionally, she told me that many people who have done their laundry super late have had the same experience. Then she kind of stopped talking and very abruptly asked if I knew about the basement. I said no, and that's when she told me that it used to be where the hospital kept dead bodies. I got freaked out. Story 12, Hunting Trip. I was 13 years old at that time. I remembered being so excited to be able to carry my own rifle to hunt squirrel for the first time. I couldn't sleep that night. I was so afraid that my dad will not wake me up to go with him. I pretty much stayed up all night. My stomach filled with butterflies with a rush in me that was hard to explain. We reached the woods before the sun even had a chance to peek over the horizon. My dad, uncle, and I made our trek through the dark steep bluffs of southeastern Minnesota. The cold air and warm ground had caused a low fog in the valley. As we reached just over the peak of the hill, the sun was just high enough to lit the horizon red. Beneath us in the valley were fluffy clouds below the green tree tops. My dad pointed to the center of the fog and stated, "That's where we are going, son, that's where all the squirrels will be at." I was excited. I could not wait to walk downhill after an exhausting climb. I was ready to shoot my first squirrel. We got down to the valley as the sun started to show itself more, and the fog slowly disappearing. It was bright enough to where the squirrels started to jump from treetops to treetops. As they were barking and chattering all around us. I was so excited, my heart was pounding hard. I couldn't wait to put my rifle crosshair on my first squirrel. My dad asked, "Are you okay staying in this area while I go and find that barking squirrel?" I was afraid, but I got my rifle with me. I wanted to show my dad that I can kill my own animal. I told my dad, okay. I'll sit around here. I watched my dad slowly crept his way to the sound of a barking squirrel. His blaze orange fading away through the dense woods. I was alone and deep inside, I was afraid. A part of me was also excited. I looked around in this cold green woods as it started to get dark again. I look up and above the trees, the fog were covering the sunlight. I was scared, but figured I better find a place to sit while I wait for my dad. I sack a nice mound of shrubs and leaves that I could sit on. I sat at the mound giving me an elevated view. I could still hear the barking squirrel in a distance. I sat and waited, hoping my dad would be back quick. The barking squirrel stopped barking, and a gunshot echoed through the woods. I smiled, and knew my dad had killed one. I waited and waited as this wood started to light up again, as the fog dispersed above the tree lines. It must have been 5 minutes since I heard my dad shot. I kept looking at his way, anxiously waiting for him to return. My body filled with chills from this cool morning. Sitting and shaking in this cold woods, I suddenly heard leaves rustling behind me. I got excited and turned my head towards the noise. At a distance I see a fox squirrel jumping from the ground up to a tree. It wagging its tail back and forth as it was teasing me. In excitement, my heart rate accelerated. I tried holding my breath. With slow movements, I crawled to the tree behind me. With my rifle in hand, I leaned against the tree to stable my shot. I had my scope right at the squirrel with my crosshairs aligned to his head. I could see the squirrel looking directly at me with his tail still waving. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding out of my chest. My hands shaking from an adrenaline rush, bouncing my crosshairs all over the place. I took the safety of the gun. My fingers slowly pulled the trigger back as my crosshairs shook around the head of the squirrel. Just as I made the trigger pulled, a shot rang out simultaneously. I flinched down a little and just above my head, tree barks splattered all over me. My ears rang from the sound of gunshot. I looked around in surprise to see what had happened. Shaken up from the shot, I lifted my rifle up again looking to see if the squirrel dead. I brought my scope up again searching for the squirrel. Up above me from the hill, I heard a scream. Neso beat size tub nrees tam sim no. Both of you father and son, stop right now. I see an orange vest running downhill. It was my uncle. His face was furious and red, but at the same time he appeared to be scared. He rushed towards the tree where I shot the squirrel. There, I see another orange blaze vest emerged from the tree. It was my dad as he looked shocked. My uncle was with him as both of them bent down to the ground. I saw my uncle picking up an orange cap and hand it to my dad. I could hear both of them whispering, and then they both ran towards me. My dad came up to me in tears and hugged me. He asked, "Are you okay?" I was confused at this point. I didn't know what was going on. I answered, "I'm okay." My uncle standing next to us inspecting the tree that I was leaning against. He looked at the both of us and said, "Up by the parking has more squirrels." I told both of them I had just shot at a fox squirrel by the tree they were at. My dad looked at me and said, "Shoo, we are going back up the hill. No more talking." I was still confused as we had made the long trek up the hill. We saw squirrels as we walked back up, but neither of them were interested. As we got to the parking lot, my dad said we are going home. I was still confused and disappointed. Once we got home was where I learned about what had happened. My dad showed me his blaze orange cap with a bullet skid through the side of the visor. He asked me what I had seen. I told him it was a fox squirrel that I had shot at. My dad then asked me if I heard him shot. I told him yes, just once. He said he shot twice. He got the gray squirrel that was barking, and when he came back, he thought he saw a fox squirrel jumping around the mound. He said he took a shot at the fox squirrel as it ducked below the tree. My uncle said he was above the both of us making his way around the ridge when he heard the leaves crunching. He looked downhill and saw me leaning against the tree. He looked towards where he heard walking, and it was my dad. He said my dad decided to lean against a tree too. My uncle said he wasn't sure what was going on until he saw us both pointing our guns at each other. He said right when he was about to yell, our guns went off. He saw my dad's orange cap went flying in the air, and tree barks exploded above my head. At the same time he saw two teenage kids by us. He said he couldn't tell if they were boys or girls, but they both had long black hair. They appeared to be two shirtless Native Americans. When he yelled, the two teenage kids disappeared from the woods. I was so scared after hearing that I had shot at my dad and he had shot at me. It made us quit hunting altogether. We were both told by other relatives that the area we were hunting was by some old Native American burial mounds. People avoid that place because of the paranormal activities they had experienced. We were just lucky enough that day that nothing seriously had happened to us. It has been 20 years since that incident. As hunting season opens up, I hope everyone have a safe trip. Story 13. This story happened to me in Fresno, California. As a Hmong American, I never actually believed what my parents told me about, not to yell or say stupid stuff out in the wilderness. In 2006, my buddies and I went on a long hunting trip and we were driving back home. We decided to take Auberry Road, from Table Mountain Casino, driving back to Clovis. It was dark, and the time would be around 11 p.m. I was sitting in the passenger seat and two buddies in the back. We were all drinking inside the car, but not the driver. My friend that was driving spotted something and told me to keep it low. Don't do stupid stuff, because my window was rolled down. I didn't listen to him and I yelled out, "Where the F are you? Show yourself if you're real or fake." When we all arrived home safely, I took a shower and went to sleep. That night I was continuously having nightmares about seeing two Native American Indians, a woman and man, following me, and trying to block my path. The next day I drove back to San Jose, California, and weird things started to happen. As I was driving, a hawk hit my front bumper of my BMW and left me a feather and a scratch mark. I got to my apartment and opened the front door. I could smell a strong odor of burned woods in the living room to my bedroom. I asked my roommate and he told me there was nothing, as I tried to investigate where the odor was coming from. That night I went to sleep and was continuously having nightmares again, seeing two Native American Indians grabbing my leg and hand. I was screaming and fighting with them in my dream. Every time I woke up and fell back to sleep, my dream would continue from where it left off. I woke up 13 times that night, and I can feel the hand marks on my leg and wrist from the dream. The drum and chanting of a Native American was whispering in my ears. I was spooked, so I called my mom at 3:00 a.m. I was a coward. My mom did some ritual stuff at home and called me saying, "Did you yell out or wanted to challenge something?" I replied, "Yes." My mom did more stuff and told me to grab a knife, and to protect myself while I was away from my parents. That night I was able to sleep better without nightmares. I saw a vision of my ancestors in Hmong clothes dragging me back to my parents' house. Thank you for always supporting the channel and welcoming its videos. Wishing you good health, and remember to subscribe to the channel to reach 1,000 subscribers.